Hi, I'm Jennifer Ackerman Haywood from CraftSanity.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make a fabric face mask. This one is the kind that has an opening to put a filter in, or you could put a mask, a medical mask in there. It also has a chenille stem in here for some closure or to shape around your face. And I'm going to show you, they fit on, these should not be used as a replacement for an N95. They can be worn over N95s. Just going to tie this up. Once you have the top part tied, you can leave it tied and only have to untie the bottom. And you can fit this right to your nose. So this is what we're going to work on today. And I should also note, these do fit over. This is my dusty mask from sanding. And if you have glasses, it's always complicated. But this fits over the N95 as well. And if you're a frontline medical worker, obviously that's the best way to do this. It'll hopefully make your N95 last longer, because the fabric mask is washable. And one of the things I do is I pre-wash all my fabric on hot, like very hot. So that way, if it's going to shrink at all, it's going to shrink before the person gets the mask. So these need to be sanitized and washed, obviously, on a regular basis if they're going to be reused. So let's get started. This one has a wire in for the nose, and there is also a slit in the back, so you can put a filter in there or another mask. This also can be worn over an N95 to make it last longer. By itself, it is definitely not a replacement for an N95. This is an appropriate mask for people who are working, in a grocery store, or just having contact with the public. Just when you guys go out grocery shopping, by itself, it would be fine for that. But this is not by any means intended for front lines medical work without another mask or filter inside of it. So I was looking for the fastest way to make one of these. And I didn't have elastic. So I'm just using fabric ties. And I played around with this, and I looked at a lot of tutorials, and this is kind of my spin on it, which I'm hoping it will help you just make these quickly, because the medical personnel have asked for these to make their N95s last longer. So to do this, what you're going to need is an 18-inch piece of fabric, cut 8.5 inches wide, and you're going to need 2 strips of fabric cut about 1 inch wide, and these are 40-inch strips. And to make these, I just take my fabric, and you can use a pinking shears. I'll grab my pinking shears here for those of you if you're not familiar. These are pinking shears. You could hand cut this, or if you have tools in your stash, you can use one of these rotary cutters with the pinking blade on it. And I actually had to run out before the lockdown and get a new blade because mine was not up to it. Okay, so I'm going to move this aside. I want to give you a little tip for fabric if you're making a lot of these. I do this when I'm weaving with fabric too. I rip my fabric, and I have a slit. I did put one in here. Here we go. You can just notch your fabric. So I notched it 8.5 inches in, and you can just tear it all the way through. And this is going to be faster than cutting and pretty accurate too. So we'll get all this out of the way. Okay, now we're going to move over to the sewing machine. And actually, no, before we go to the sewing machine, since I'm at the ironing board, I'm going to just stay here. I'm going to get my ties ready. Now, you could use bias tape for this as well, but if you don't have it, I'm kind of doing this tutorial as if you don't have a lot of supplies, because we didn't get a lot of time to plan for this. We are finding ourselves on lockdown, and we didn't exactly all go shopping for this. So what you can do is just fold this over, and because you have that, it's cut the way it is with that pinking shears or your rotary cutter, you have a situation, and I'm making this way harder than it. Because we use that rotary blade, with the pinking shear on there. It keeps it from fraying. And you can add a little water to this if you want to do that. And pardon my blackened thumbnail here. I just moved and I pinched my thumb between the wall and a chest freezer. So that was quite a situation. So now it looks like I have some weird nail polish on. All right. Just gonna keep going along here. And again, I was just looking for a really fast way to make ties. Some people have used jersey knit and parts of t-shirts, all kinds of things. I'm just using fabric to do this. I'm going to do this one more time so it's ready to go. If you use bias tape that's already finished, you don't have to worry about doing this, but like I said, if you don't have any on hand, this works too. And what you can do is, as you go along, you can do these in batches, like make a bunch of ties, cut a bunch of the mask pieces, get your pipe cleaner ready. I didn't say that yet, but I use the chenille stems, which you can see right over here. I'm using the 12-inch chenille stems. I'm cutting them into thirds. And when I cut them into thirds, I make sure that I fold over the ends, just curl up the end a little bit. And you can't really see that so well because the chenille stem is pretty fuzzy, so you can't see the ends. But you just want to make sure that when someone's wearing that on their nose, especially for long periods of time when they have that, you don't want it to poke through the fabric and poke the person wearing it. That would not be good. Okay, so to show you, I kind of just fold it and then I just cut on these loops. And I don't do this, like I don't sit there and measure it down to the, you know, down to the centimeter here. I just, or millimeter or whatever you want to do. I'm not exact about it. I just cut it and then I just curl up the ends just with my finger and kind of push it down into a surface. Okay, so let's move over to the sewing machine. Okay, so I have this piece of fabric folded right sides together. Now, if you're making masks that are not going to have this opening here, this is how someone's going to be able to tell that this is the back of the mask, because they'll see the stitching. I'm stitching it purposely in contrasting thread so they can see. If you're going to do one, I've done these for my sister who works in a nursing home. This does not have any kind of wire in it for the nose, and it doesn't have any kind of pouch here to put filters. She was wearing this over a 95, so she just needs to put it on the outside. If you're going to do that, use 2 pieces of fabric. So instead of having one continuous piece here, one piece folded in half, you'd have 2 different contrasting colors, one for the front, one for the back, and then you can have your ties be whatever color you want. But my hope is that people will be able to tell this is the back because of this pouch. But you do want to have, for safety, a way for people to tell the front from the back. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create this pouch. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to stitch about 2.5 inches in here and 2.5 inches in here. Now, I'm not, you know, you can measure it. I'm going to kind of eyeball it because, you know, we're kind of going for speed here. We have a crisis situation. We want these to hold up and work. I do a little back spacing or back stitching here. I'm getting my typing mixed with my sewing. And I back stitch there too. I got my sewing really confused with my. Okay, so you're gonna sew in about 2.5 inches, the back stitch in the front, or the start of the stitch and the end of the stitch. Okay, and then what you're gonna do is open this up and we're going to top stitch it. So we're going to sew around that on each side. And what I do first is I hop back over to my iron, and I'm just going to press that seam open. And it just makes it a little easier you can hold it down with your finger if you want, but I think this just makes it a little easier. And again, I'm just doing this really quickly. You could sew it on the other, or you could press it on the other side too, but that's not really necessary. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down this side, and then I'm going to go down the other side. And this is just going to give that some support here, this opening. Again, back stitching. And you want to make sure you're not sewing through both sides. So you just want to sew right along the edge here. And I mean the edge of the fabric. I'm not up close to the fold. I'm kind of trying to catch that fabric. And it doesn't really matter that much. You do your preference here. The big thing is you're just trying to give that opening some structure and support. Okay, so when I get down here, I've kind of just gone across, kind of go back and forth a little bit. And then we're just going to come down the other side. And again, you just want to make sure you're not sewing through more than what you intended to. I can go back and forth here too. Okay, so this is what I'm left with. So as you can see, there's an opening. It's not a raw edge. So we're all set there. Now what I need to do is, you don't want, I've made some masks with the opening right at the top. I don't really like that because I want to have space so I can add the nose wire and have it down a little bit. So on this one, I'm down about 1 inch. So what I do here is I just position this down. And what you can do is just press it down with your hands, or you can hop back over to your iron real quick and just press that edge and then press. Because now we're going to sew down this side and down this side. Okay, and that just gives you a little more structure. Notice I'm not using pins because that kind of slows the process down, and the idea is to be able to do these quickly. If I was able to get together with my sisters or other crafty friends of mine, I would have it set up in stations where everyone is doing a part of this. Now, you can do that with people in your own house, but so since we're kind of doing these on smaller scale assembly line, you can come up with ways to make this easy for yourself. So one way to do that is to do get a bunch of ties ready, then work on the different steps that you need and do it in batches. That kind of helps make it go a little bit faster. Okay, so I have sewn along the sides, and now I'm going to turn this right side out through that opening for the filter. You can just pull this out. Push that out with your finger. If you want, you can also use a scissors, or just gonna grab a pen without the ink part retracted. Just push those out. Now this doesn't matter all that much, but it just helps it have a little more uniform shape. Okay, and so now that I have this like this, I'm going to get ready to pleat this. So put some pleats in. I usually put about 3 pleats in there, and I'm going to pop back over to the iron, and I'm just going to press this. Now, I don't have a fancy foot for my machine that does any pleats or anything, and I didn't order one. I felt like, okay, I'm gonna just wing it here. So usually what I do is I start just folding over, and I usually, every time I do this, I usually have to do it a couple times. It probably would be a lot easier with the pleating foot, but I also think it's kind of nice for me to show how to do this without one, because we can help without having tons of supplies. Okay, and then I grab these really awesome clips. Now, if you don't have clips like this, you could use clothespins, you could pin it, you can just improvise. That's okay to improvise. And I'm just clipping these to hold the pleats. Now notice these pleats aren't like super awesome. You know, you can check and see on the front. Actually, I don't really like how that looks, how these are too close together. So I'm gonna start this again. So get this extra thread off of here. So we're gonna try this again. Okay. So I'm happy with that. Going to just clip this. And again, I'm showing you a pretty speedy version here. You could do this, and you can press this. I usually don't, so you can obviously you need to press it a little longer than that. Just because, again, I'm going for speed. And I'm going to just start sewing on the edge here. And I'm really just having the seam allowance here is basically just the edge of my presser foot. I'll get this started. Then I take the clips off. And you're sewing through a lot of fabric as you go. So what I do is, as I kind of back stitch a little bit, as I go through over those big okay, we're going to switch to the other side. And this tutorial is really intended for people that are, maybe you haven't done a lot of sewing and you're just like, okay, I want to just try to help. If you're an accomplished seamstress, I don't think I'm going to be teaching you much in this video. So, okay, so this is what I'm left with. And I'm not going to worry about my little threads hanging off right now. I'll come back to that. Okay, so this is the back. And what I need to do now is I need to add in my chenille stem. I'm going to grab it over here. Okay, and so I'm going to have a tie that goes across the top that's going to hide this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this and just kind of eyeball that. So I'm going to stick it inside here. And I'm going to just position it so it's in the center. And kind of center it. And again, I'm kind of eyeballing this. Okay. And what I do is you actually can just, once you know where it is, you can kind of sew right next to it. Now you don't want to sew through it, so that's not a great idea for your machine. So I just sew right next to it, and I can kind of feel where the end is. And this one's kind of wanting to push over, so I'm going to kind of push that back. Okay, so now I know I'm past it. I'm just, well, I thought I was past it here. Let's see. Okay, and so I'm just doing some stitches to kind of hold it in place, because you don't want this thing sliding all over the place. Okay, and then I'm going to just put another, so it can slide a little bit, but not much. Okay, so now I have the nose wire is in place. Now I'm ready to add my tie. And the way I do this is I just take the tie, fold it in half, kind of crease it here with my fingers. And then you can fold this in half. Find your center point. It's hard to do it when you're holding on to two things at once. Okay, this is my center point. So I want these two center points to line up. You could mark your center point on one of these items with a pin and then line it up that way. What I do to check my work is I put one of these clips in, and then I'll go like this and just see, okay, how close. If you pull these things up, do these line up? Yeah, we're good. Okay, so what I'll do is go back down here. Now I'm gonna have to worry about this, this chenille stem. I don't want to sew over that because that wouldn't, my needle would not like that. So I gotta be careful when I sew this side. I sew the top. Clip that on there. Okay, and so now what I'm going to do is just start sewing the tie. And go pretty fast on this part. Where it connects to like the back stitch there. Now I got to be aware that I'm going to be coming up to my wire area here. So for this part, I'm going to sew more toward the edge of the tie. I'm just removing the clips as I come up to them. And again, if you don't have clips, you can pin it. That's no problem. And then you can cruise on this last part. Okay, now I have to do the same thing on the bottom. And, oh, and I see, okay, I notice here, this happens sometimes. If you, in my haste to sew quickly and avoid that tie, or I'm sorry, avoid the wire, I missed part of it here. So I'm just gonna go back over that. And that's okay. I mean, I'm obviously going faster than I normally would because of, I'm trying to make a video and not have it take all day. But don't worry if this doesn't come out perfect, because they have to serve a purpose, and they have to hold up to do their job. But these might not be the most beautiful things you've ever made, and that's okay. So once again, I'm folding this in half. I'm going to find the halfway point, center on here, and line these two things up. Double check and make sure I am at the halfway point. I do that just by holding up the ties. Looks pretty good. Now, if you wanted this to look super sharp, you could put some of this, cut a small length of this tie and put it across here to cover your stitches. I'm not doing that. Again, I'm not trying to be careless with this, but I'm also recognizing that I'm one person. I can only make so many masks, so I'm trying to do this in the way that I can make the most, and they're usable, but not taking a year to do each one, because that's not actually a good use of time when we need more volume. Okay, again, I'm just sewing on the edge. This time I'm going to be a little more mindful and try to make sure I'm catching it on the front and the back when I come up to the mask. don't have to worry about any wires on the bottom. So that makes the bottom a little bit easier. All right, the last thing you can do is trim off your ends, and when you're done, you can trim this up and you'll have a mask that will be, could be worn over an N95. It could be worn by itself with a filter or another hospital grade mask inserted in there. But without very much fabric or very much time, you end up with something that can hopefully help the people out that are out there trying to save lives right now. So hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, you could email jennifer@craftsanity.com or leave a comment below the video. Stay well, everyone.